Before I begin, I'd just like to say that I'm somewhat sick and congested right now, so my voice might be a little off. On top of that, I would like very much to give a shout out to Rehab Room, the channel Rehab Room, for bringing this bizarre quote to my attention. Now, today we're going to be talking about the concept of quote-unquote hard work and how it actually applies to things in real life. But when you look at a quote like this by Hamza, aka Bathrobe Man, one of the most disingenuous and slimy people on the platform, to be perfectly honest, you have to really ask yourself if he's memeing at this stage. How do you think you can catch up whilst playing an hour of video games a day? I mean, an hour of video games a day isn't that much, all things considered. And if you think about it, his entire message here would have come off as more authentic if he had said 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day. Then people might have thought, oh, spending 10 hours a day playing video games is a total waste, and I can definitely see the problem there. An hour a day? He's clearly memeing now, right? He has to be memeing. And if he's not memeing, you really have to call into question the degree of suckerhood of his acolytes and the people who take him seriously. This cannot be taken seriously. But there's a kernel of something here that nonetheless needs to be addressed, and that's this notion of you have to work hard in life to get where you want to go. And there is sometimes truth to that, in the narrowest of sense. And by that I mean quite simply, if you do nothing, absolutely nothing, typically nothing will happen. From nothing comes nothing. So let's say you have a goal of improving your fitness. If you just lie in bed all day and never move, you probably won't improve your fitness. And whilst there might be some people out there like that fit into that category of they don't do anything whatsoever and therefore they achieve nothing, I think that contingent of individuals is vanishingly small. They're probably sub 1%. No, the vast majority of people, actually when they try to achieve something, try to do something, they spend some time invested in the activity. The amount of time might vary, but the fact of the matter is they actually spend time doing quote-unquote work. And so assuming that most people put in varying degrees of work into different activities and into things that they view as goals, things they seek to achieve, you have to then look at the numbers, some people would argue, right? So let's say you're only spending 2 or 3 hours a day trying to achieve a goal. Well, a lot of people would say, well, that's not enough time. The fundamental thing that we need to call in question here before proceeding is whether or not work, or quote-unquote hard work, really is the key and the silver bullet solution that the vast majority of people claim it is and preach that it is. And you can even notice some cracks and fissures in this line of argumentation. Many people will argue work smart, not hard. So they'll still say you have to work, and like I said at the beginning, some expenditure of energy, some kind of investment is necessary in order to get the ball moving at times, in most cases. But how much? Nobody really knows. In general, the maxim remains just work a lot, work harder, such as implied in this ridiculous quote by Hamza, aka Bathrobe Man. Well, there's so many factors to consider when it comes to this notion of just work harder in order to achieve your goals, just work harder, or the reason why you failed in life is because you didn't work hard enough. We'll set aside for now this notion of working smarter. Because one thing I've observed in my life, and outside of my life, that is, primarily with other people, constantly, on a perennial basis, is that in every instance, talent will outdo work, aka hard work, without question. I'm of course talking here about potential outcomes as well, in the sense that if you do absolutely nothing and you're talented, yes, then nothing will happen. But even a smidgen of effort on the part of a talented individual versus an average, or God's forbid, a below average individual, in whatever activity you can imagine, be it sport, weightlifting, sprinting, learning to code, learning a foreign language, mathematics, even playing a video game, that talent will always eclipse the quote-unquote effort and work of the other individual, especially if the talented individual puts in commensurate work. It's obvious. But even if he doesn't put in commensurate work and effort, he still will eclipse the individual if he puts in a little effort. And I have seen this in countless examples throughout my life. Again, countless examples. I have seen people trying to study and learn about coding, and I have seen how the talented individuals have completely blown the others away by simply investing a little bit of time and effort, and the others trying to play catch up because they were much less talented. Another very obvious example is going to the gym, beefing up, getting stronger, building your body. Something that to all but the dullest of people is obviously just about genetics. The person who puts in more effort doesn't necessarily produce better results, because if he doesn't have the right frame, he doesn't have the right potential hormonally, he doesn't have the right distribution of muscle fibers and structure, and he's not going to get the same results. A guy who works out twice a week, say a full body workout, with enormous talent and potential to develop a great body, he has a great frame, long muscle fibers, high testosterone levels, etc., with only average nutrition, is going to blow away an average guy who spends 4 to 5 times a week with meticulous nutrition, tracking everything. He's going to blow that guy away because he has better genes for the task at hand. Of course, with bodybuilding or weightlifting, that kind of stuff is very obvious, but a lot of people discount that when they're thinking about other activities. I'll give you another example. A very close friend of mine is an extremely talented linguist, as in he is a practicing linguist at a university, certainly the most talented linguist I've ever met. But on top of that, and this is independent of his own abilities to understand complex linguistic topics, he has the ability, unironically, to perfectly imitate any accent in a foreign language, any sound, what are called phonemes, without any issue whatsoever. And so he always sounds native, whatever language he speaks. That is incredibly difficult. And having taught both German and English throughout my life, I can tell you that most people can't even get close to that. They never will. He just hears something, he perfectly imitates it, to the point where it's almost a joke. He happens to speak a little bit of Danish, and because he has a perfect Danish accent, and Danish is one of the most difficult languages in the world to pronounce accurately. It's very difficult in this regard. Danes think he's a native until they discover that he only can speak a little and doesn't understand what they're talking about. But again, you can't just work hard to get that. That's just raw talent. That is a combination of muscle coordination, muscle memory, in terms of the organs of articulation. This is another example. There are many, many such examples throughout life. Countless examples. You probably knew the guy when you were growing up that struggled in mathematics class in school, but you, conversely, probably also knew the guy who just sat there, doodled, and got everything instantly, and you probably knew the majority of people that were somewhere in between. They didn't really quite get it right away, but they also didn't suck terribly. They were average. And the guy who was just doodling, he didn't need to do a whole lot. So talent will always eclipse work, assuming even a little bit of work is put in. And we also need to talk about where the desire to work hard comes from as well. It's very important. Well, the desire to work hard from an external validation point comes from the rewards reaped potentially by that work. And so this is a feedback loop and something people very rarely talk about. But here's the secret that they don't want you to know. Usually, talent begets hard work, and hard work begets talent. Well, hold on a second, Stardust. What do you mean? Talent begets hard work and hard work begets talent. Here's the thing. I'm going to take a very famous example here. Many of you might know this example. You might have heard of a guy called Chris Bumstead. He's the 5-time classic physique Mr. Olympia. This guy has been gifted ungodly bodybuilding genes. And on top of that, he's very attractive too. Easily a 7.5, maybe even 8. And he's 6'2". So you have all these factors playing into this. And so you look at Chris Bumstead, who has insane genetics on every level, just incredible genetics for bodybuilding, and specifically for classic physique. The V-taper, the structure, the height, everything. And you think, well, that's what did it for him. And that's true. People will say, but he works really hard too. Why does he work hard? Think about the point of motivation here, gentlemen. It's very simple. When the rewards that you can potentially reap are great, because you have talent, you're more motivated to work hard, which is my point from earlier. Talent begets hard work, and hard work begets talent. It's a feedback loop. If you have piss-poor bodybuilding genetics, you are never going to be a Mr. Olympia. If you are a 5'4" shrimp with very average genes for building muscle and strength, you might work really, really hard, but your motivation to work hard is going to dwindle over time because it's not producing spectacular results. You might put on a little bit of muscle mass, you might get a little bit stronger, but you're in no way going to get the results of Chris Bumstead. And yes, I know that he juices, they all juice. Even if you juiced, you still wouldn't get the same results as Chris Bumstead. And so that feedback loop of you're really talented, you're really gifted, so you work hard with those gifts, which then leads to even greater results, that is the primary motivating factor for most individuals to work hard. Hard work by itself can, in many instances, be completely useless and lead absolutely nowhere. So whilst it's true that average people can work hard and achieve decent things, you just need a smidgen of talent, and perhaps even more importantly, a lot of talent to really push you beyond the threshold of you're just going to put in some work. Now, of course, there are people of Chris Bumstead's talent, say in bodybuilding, that do not work nearly as quote-unquote hard. But the point is that when you have a real ability in something and you are rewarded by that ability, the same could be applied to coding, mathematics, engineering, learning languages, any kind of sport, then you're more motivated to pursue this, right? I've talked about this before. When you have piss-poor genetics in the gym, yes, you can improve, but your improvements are going to be fairly mediocre. And so eventually, your motivation, in all likelihood, might wane. But it won't do so with Chris Bumstead. Now, admittedly, Chris Bumstead is literally the apex of his craft. He is a 5-time classic Mr. Olympia winner, so that's kind of obvious. But this applies across the board. Talent is the biggest motivator in order for people to work hard. His talent, of genetic origin, of course, allows you to actually achieve things. And a final point to drive home on this particular aspect of things, and that is, if you don't have talent, you're going to struggle more with it. And that can be frustrating, which is going to lead you to give up earlier. I know a guy who is extremely talented in mathematics and coding. He was so talented that he was doing university-level courses in high school years ago. And he ended up doing a dual degree in physics and computer science. Do you think that this individual would have pursued these things if he had been struggling the whole time? Probably not. He would have been irritated. I was always below average in mathematics. Not terrible, but below average. And so I had to put in quote-unquote work. And the reality is that demotivated me. It made me less interested in mathematics as a subject. If I had instantly grasped it, wow. Now, conversely, I was not super talented, but above average when it came to foreign languages, as well as dead languages, things like Latin and Greek. And so I was more motivated because it came more easily to me. This is how human motivation and desire to work hard works. People forget this. It is a feedback loop of positive reward that is begotten by the talent that enables you to push beyond the most rudimentary of barriers to go further and then to gain greater rewards through your talent, through your genetic heritage. That's how it works. But of course, you were eventually going to come to the grimmest prospects concerning quote-unquote hard work. And that is the very notion of hard work itself is mediated to a great extent by your genes. Not everyone will work hard, and not everyone can work hard. And how do we know this? Well, I'm going to bore you a little bit just with the abstract of a study. I will post the link to the study. I encourage you to read the whole thing. And it will show you that conscientiousness, which is basically the personality trait that enables hard work, itself has a strong genetic component, something that you didn't quote-unquote choose. So bear with me for a bit because this is going to be a little dry, but it's important. So the study is called Genetic and Environmental Architecture of Conscientiousness in Adolescence. Quote, using a genetically informative design, about 2,000 twin pairs, we investigated the phenotypic and genetic and environmental architecture of a broad construct of conscientiousness, including conscientiousness per se, effortful control, self-control, and grit. These 4 different measures were substantially correlated. The coefficients range from 0.74 to 0.79. Univariate genetic analyses revealed that individual differences in conscientious measures were modestly attributable to additive genetic factors to an extent ranging from 62 to 64%. We obtained no evidence that shared environmental influences were observed. Multivariate genetic analyses showed that for the 4 measures we used to assess conscientiousness, remember from earlier, they're referring to conscientiousness per se, effortful control, self-control, and grit. Just to remind you, genetic correlations were stronger than the corresponding non-shared environmental correlations, and that a latent common factor accounted for over 84% of the genetic variance. Our findings suggest that individual differences in the 4 measures of conscientiousness are not distinguishable at both the phenotypic and behavioral genetic levels, and that the overlap was substantially attributable to genetic factors. And finally, to round out this discussion, I would very much like to talk about a part of the study that is in the results itself. And again, I would encourage you to read the study for yourselves. It's very interesting. It's very relevant, salient. We're all human beings, and this affects us all. But specifically, I want to talk about what the authors have to say with respect to just how genetic conscientiousness, i.e. the ability to work hard, is. Quote, moreover, as shown in the bar chart in Figure 2, over 80% of the genetic influences on each conscientiousness-related measure were derived from the common latent factor, e.g., for conscientiousness, 92% of the genetic influence was due to the common latent factor, whereas 8% was specific. This finding suggests that the broad construct of conscientiousness is highly genetically driven. I'll repeat that, very important. This finding suggests that the broad construct of conscientiousness is highly genetically driven. And by the heavens and all the gods that rule over us, gentlemen, I sincerely hope that studies like these, and there are many others out there, finally nail the coffin shut on this notion that hard work is somehow some distinct abstract quality that anyone can engage in, a freebie, as it were, as opposed to other things like talent, beauty, intelligence, although there are people, arguably, that will still argue that you can work on those things as well and dramatically alter them. But no, the reality is that the seat, the origin of your ability to work hard, the ability to apply yourself, resides in conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is highly genetically driven, to quote the authors, and it is not a freebie. It is not some abstract floating in the air for anyone to grab. Your ability to work hard is driven by the genes you've inherited to a large extent. And it's also, by the way, personality traits. These things are separate from intelligence. You can be very smart, but also be very lazy. You can be very dumb and very hardworking, and if you're very lucky, you can be very smart and very hardworking, because personality traits are separate from intelligence. But either way, hard work is significantly determined by your genes. It's not available to everyone to just work hard. End of story. We don't need to listen to this BS anymore. And then we come to the last leg of the video, this notion that hard work always pays off. There are lots of people in the world who have worked really hard and they did not get anywhere. Maybe, perhaps even likely, in many of these cases where they did work hard, they lacked the talent to sustain that hard work or the talent to produce good results. It's entirely possible. But this notion that hard work, again, is this panacea, this silver bullet, this cure to everything, when there are endless variations of quote-unquote working smarter, which just means being smart enough to not have to work hard, or even some instances where no hard work is required, like when you're a supermodel and you just look really good and people just select you on the basis of your looks. Or look at the many instances of attractive female streamers these days, or YouTube personalities that are successful solely due to their looks and nothing else. How are you going to then invoke the notion of hard work? And I think it's very telling and interesting that in today's day and age, we're almost in 2024 at this stage, that the whole notion of working hard, which has always been this folksy notion that people have talked about for generations, if not centuries, has been utterly dispelled and refuted by the reality of the internet, where many, say, attractive people don't need to work hard. They just need to show their faces in a camera. Where's the hard work in that? So I think it's impossible at this stage, if you're in your right mind, to listen to a line such as, "You just need to work even harder, bruh," and to put any credence into that. Yes, in many instances, not all, like I said, very attractive people become streamers or models. A smidgen of work is required. But as I said, talent begets hard work because it motivates you, because you're going to get better results because you understand things, and vice versa. And conscientiousness, which is the origin of the ability to work hard, is heritable. So no, hard work is not a cure-all for everything, despite what people claim. And it's really down to the individual to determine whether or not simply working hard, whatever that really means at the end of the day, is going to produce results that they want. You really have to look at the individual situation you're in, your individual gifts or lack of gifts in many cases, to see whether or not, quote unquote, working hard is a worthwhile time investment for you. And ideally, you have to see past this notion that hard work is this unalloyed good that is always something to be striven for, always something to be pursued. Yes, in some cases it might be, but it is highly context dependent. And guess what the context is? It's you, your genes, your environment, and your individual situation. Always look at it from that perspective. Don't buy into slogans and sloganeering a la Bathrobe Man, Hamza, and the rest of this messed up society we live in. Anyway, as always, thank you very much indeed for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons, the donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. You keep the channel going. Without you, this channel could not exist in its current form. Very much appreciated. As for everybody else, if you can leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, if you're not yet a subscriber, apparently helps out the channel and channel growth. Be much appreciated. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out next time. Until then, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.